So I guess this is what it's like to be on the other side of the camera. It explains a lot. So people often ask me how I take the photos that I take, and I've given a lot of different answers over the years. Practice, luck, understanding composition, light, and color. But then I really started to think about it. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. So growing up, I was a happy kid for the most part. I like to look at things from funny angles. And then things happened the way they happen to a lot of people, and I found myself without a father and quickly moving out of childhood into the role of an adult. Like a lot of people, I started to feel a disconnection to the things that defined me as a child. Time passed, and mostly good time, and then my daughter Alexandra was born. And she needed to be photographed. So that's what I did. The best unexpected effect of photography was that it caused me to focus on things I used to overlook or take for granted. I began to re-see things and break away from patterns, assumptions, and labels. In a lot of ways, it was like that time as a kid in the backyard of my house, catching frogs, turning things over to see what was beneath them, and exploring new worlds. I decided to take that to the next level and visit some of the most beautiful places in the world to see if I could capture their essence or find something unique in places that had been photographed many times before. This unique sandstone formation is called the Wave on the border between Arizona and Utah. It's a 6-mile unmarked hike in the desert. It's treacherous to get to. But when you get there, it's like you've landed on another planet. So I would find myself standing, in this case shivering, in places so remote you could look up and see the Milky Way, dozens of shooting stars with your naked eye. In Hawaii, rainbows are so prevalent you can often find them resting up against mountains. It's ridiculous. It's really easy to go to beautiful places to take photographs. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? But I found that returning to the real world could be kind of a letdown. And it made me reconsider what it was that made those trips memorable in the first place. One of Louis C.K.'s best skits is "Everything is Amazing and No One is Happy," where he talks about flying 800 miles an hour at 40,000 feet and people are complaining about the Wi-Fi not working. We live at a time where amazing and beautiful can very quickly become invisible. About 2 years ago, I started hiking every Sunday morning with a group of friends. We did it for the exercise, but soon found that we were relating to each other and our surroundings a little differently. It slowed our worlds down. 15 people hiking in silence can be a revelation. It's kind of like the opposite of Facebook. Those hikes have surprised me time and time again and reminded me that there's magic everywhere if we're willing to dig a little deeper. This is an aphid if you get really, really close to it, the way you might have done as a kid before it became just another bug. So having hiked in every season and every possible kind of weather has been a little bit like going on vacation every weekend to a different part of the country. And it's allowed me to ask some interesting creative questions like, what does fall look like if I'm standing on my head? What if I could make time stand still? What if I could wander into the tree of life? What if I could walk into a Wyeth painting? Or run into Rocky at the end of a long city hike? Photography taught me to expect surprise. Things that once seemed like unlikely timing started to show up more and more. This happened at an intermission to a house concert in Arden. And I love the expression of the people in the background, the wonder in their eyes, as much as the subject itself. So I started to realize how easy it is to go on autopilot, to do and see things a certain way and come to expect that. Our expectations often sell us short, and it made me think a little bit differently and ask one very important question. What happens if? What happens if we get flat on the ground to see something, climb to the top of a stadium, or crawl into spaces we would never imagine going into? This is what happens if we take water from that hose and freeze it at a shutter speed of 1/5000th of a second. I decided to take that a little further and ask, what happens if I do that with a rainbow? Because I did that, the image ended up on the cover of a really, really great book. Curiosity creates opportunity. And then I decided to apply that to my creative work. And instead of taking the obvious photo, I asked, what happens if I ask that skateboarder to jump over me? Or, what happens if I make that mirror see through people instead of reflect them? What happens if some mirrors aren't completely reliable? What if I could capture the true essence of a musical icon instead of his stage persona? Sometimes you could witness curiosity in the wild, and it is unmistakable. This happened at a sold-out show at the Grand that I don't remember at all, but I do remember the little girl watching it. Curiosity connects us to the human spirit because it is in all of us, usually hiding. Sometimes curiosity allows a stranger to share something amazing. I was coming back from a shoot when this guy stopped me in the street and asked me to take his photo. I said, sure, but only if you do something worth photographing. I do that all the time now, and it's almost always worth it. Sometimes curiosity leads us to something amazing. I was chasing this fall sunrise one morning, trying to find the right foreground for it, until I ended up here. Now this image is on the cover of the State of Delaware road map, and probably the shot of mine that's been seen by the most people. Sometimes we can create curiosity in others through fun and surprise by taking something and turning it on its head. The videographer is in my company. He's actually videoing over here. The ballerinas rehearse upstairs, but when we put them together, we had something that ended up becoming the Fringe Festival poster cover for that year. So, many years ago, another photographer asked me if I was familiar with infrared photography. Infrared is the kind of photography that just sees heat energy, which our eyes can't see, but some animals can. For a long time, it was just a black and white technique, but recent advances in digital have allowed us to maintain some of the color. I got hooked, and I've been shooting infrared for over a decade. This is Gibraltar Garden, right smack in the middle of the downtown. Even in disrepair, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous place, but in infrared, it looks like the Garden of Eden in winter. People look a little haunted in infrared. Their pupils get really small. It makes the skin super smooth, almost plasticky. But still, it's a very interesting thing to experiment with. So over time, I've actually learned to see in infrared and look for the opportunity to go to places that have been photographed many times before to see them through new eyes. I think that it's incredible that there's a tool out there that can allow us to see what some snakes and hummingbirds are able to see in that kind of detail, and then use that to create art. So the ability to see through new eyes is something that is a tool that can be related to anything in life, especially considering second chances. And it's certainly something that's helped me with things much more important than photography. Our patterns and assumptions can be a different kind of prison. In a town like this that gets little positive press, there's beauty everywhere. Standing on top of Christina Tower on a spring morning, the colors of the skyline compress into almost watercolor tones. Despite what you might hear, there are beautiful and exciting things happening here all the time. Art is popping up everywhere, almost weekly. Just take a walk down the path to the Peterson Refuge and see it with fresh eyes. A few years ago, I was taking photos inside an old abandoned movie theater. It was nothing more than a collapsing shell of mold and dripping metal, but still beautiful in a way. Today, because a small number of people asked what happens if, the Queen Theater has never been as dynamic or alive. Curiosity creates vision. When you exercise curiosity, you start to attract magic. When shooting this fall photo of Chelsea, a small tornado of leaves surrounded her before we even got out of the parking lot. Some people have a way of making things like that happen. I find they're often the most curious ones. Exercise curiosity and you start to attract magic. Does anyone know what this is? This is ordinary bamboo, held up to the sun and shot with an iPhone. It almost looks like a Stanley Kubrick movie effect. There is wonder right under your nose. Exercise curiosity and you start to attract magic. Apply that to relationships, to work, to life. A few months ago, I was asked to take several dozen portraits for a city campaign. It was an interesting challenge because I only had a little time with each of the people to try to find something interesting for the project to show in them. I was amazed how quickly each of them were revealed as unique, surprising, and beautiful. I had a very similar experience just a few weeks ago, right in this very room. I've come to realize that curiosity informs my photography more than any other single element. Whenever I take what I think is a good photo, I can usually point back to something I was curious about that was answered by the photo. It's taken me a long time to get to this place. My daughter is almost an adult now. Hopefully, she will always want to be learning, being curious, and asking what happens if. So curiosity is a skill that can be applied to just about anything. In a way, it's kind of given me a second chance to become the person I've always been. And I'd like to turn that back around to you and ask, what is it that you are curious about? What is it that would have you leap out of bed like it was the first day of summer? Imagine that and visualize it and listen to it. Of course, sometimes curiosity has unintended consequences. I learned the value of being able to very quickly run in zigzags. Curiosity didn't kill the cat. It thrilled the cat. Taught him how to live. A.H. Alma said that the fulfillment of our life is to see life objectively, to see what's really there. Life is the expression and fulfillment and celebration of beauty. This is what we're here for. We're not here for anything else. What happens if? Thank you.